Right, lads, so if you don't know who I am, my name's Liam. I've been competing in competitive Mario Kart for just over 5 years now. I've reached the highest possible rank in the competitive ladder. I've won multiple tournaments, and I've peaked at being the rank 1 player globally multiple times. And to play this game consistently at a high level requires two things. Firstly, a lot of game time, and secondly, a lot of game knowledge. I'm not joking when I say I know every single main track in this game like the back of my hand. And that means I also know the insane amount of really cool tech that this game has to offer. And the really unfortunate thing is the average Mario Kart fan won't know about most of this stuff if they're not tuned into the competitive scene, which most people aren't. This was honestly a real struggle for me when I started out playing competitive Mario Kart. There was just such a lack of educational media, whether that be full tutorials on how to drive certain tracks or item management guides. It can make getting into the competitive scene and improving at the game a bit of a daunting task, just because finding the resources for it in itself can be quite difficult. And a big aspiration of mine has been to change that. So in this video, I'm going to use the fact that I admittedly play this game a bit too much, and the fact that I know every single track like the back of my hand, to show you every single shortcut and strategy that you need to know to win in Mario Kart World. This game has an unbelievable amount of cool stuff to talk about, and I feel like gatekeeping all the really cool strats to the niche competitive scene would honestly be an absolute shame. So as we cover every single main track in the game, I'm going to go over all of the strategies and shortcuts that are used to compete at a high level. And just before we get started, there are two things I want to note. I'm going over every single online viable strategy. There are definitely some really cool shortcuts I'm not going to talk about in this video, and that's just going to be because of its difficulty and the fact that the risk-reward factor is just not worth it. And also, I'm going to be basing all of these guides on the combo swoop on the Rob Hog, as this is by far and away the meta combo, the most used combo in the entire game. But generally speaking, these will work on any combo you like, so if you don't want to do these on the meta, then you don't have to worry. But yeah, anyways, with that explanation out of the way, let's get started. I'll be talking about these tracks in order of the Grand Prix, so that means we're starting with Mario Bros. Circuit. This is the opener, the big introduction to the entire game, and usually the opener tracks of Mario Kart games don't have a whole lot going on. Thankfully, that is not the case here. First up, literally at the very start of the race, you can get a starter boost. Immediately hold hard left and start a charge jump, then aim to angle yourself to the right side of this Luigi Tires sign, and then right before you're about to run into the Luigi tire sign, release your charge jump. You'll bounce off the sign, giving you a lot of height, enough height to get over these tires and take this railing, which is a much faster way of taking the first turn of the track. This one is consistent with practice, and the most common fail methods are fairly avoidable. It mainly comes down to the timing of your charge jump. If you charge jump too early, you won't get enough height, and if you charge jump too late, you probably won't get the charge jump out at all. You have to make sure you release your charge jump right before you hit the sign. No earlier, no later. And once you get it down, you really get it down. This one is not too bad. And also, you can only do this one from certain starting positions. You see, when you charge jump and bonk into the sign, you need to be facing the sign enough to get enough height to get over the tires. So if you're starting in the right side positions, first, second, third, and fourth, this one is a lot easier to get. And it can be done in fifth or sixth as well, but it's a little bit more challenging. You also do need to be in a top spot to get this one. So if you're starting all the way back in 24th, then unfortunately you can't do this. This one is only feasible if you're starting in the front. Okay, next up is the fastest method of the ending mushroom shortcut. Typically, if you have a mushroom at the end, you'd do this, but this is really slow. Instead, you can take this railing, do a right trick off it, start a charge jump, steer to the left, use your mushroom and do a left charge jump onto this platform, which is much faster. Of course, there's quite a bit there, so I'll show you how to do it step by step. First, take this yellow railing, and once the rail starts to bend around the corner, a good visual marker is right before this grey bit, do a right trick and immediately start a charge jump on the landing. And also, as soon as you land, make sure you're holding hard left. Coming up to this lighter bit of dirt, you're going to want to make sure you're lined up with the right side of this rock. And once you get here, you can use your mushroom and shortly after do a left charge jump onto the right side of that rock, which will give you enough height to make it onto this platform, and then you've done it. The timings of every step to get onto the platform can be quite precise, but with a good bit of practice, I have found this one to be quite consistent. The worst and most common fail, however, is missing the charge jump entirely while trying to get onto the platform. Since you only charge the charge jump just in time to get onto the platform, the timing does take a good bit of practice, but once you get it down, again, you get it down. And this is the most effective place on the entire track that you can use a single mushroom. And this one is also super easy with a feather. It is literally as simple as feathering over these boxes, and it's worth practicing alongside the mushroom method. And finally, we have the shroomless rail cut. Basically what I showed you at the beginning, but without the startup boost, which is a bit difficult, but possible nonetheless. You're going to want to get onto this green railing, then trick off it about halfway through. You'll land on the right side of this grey road, and once you do, start a charge jump and start steering to the left. Keep on steering left into the Luigi tire sign, and right as you're about to bonk into it, release your charge jump. And if you've pulled that off correctly, you should just get above the tires in front of you and make it onto the railing. This method is quite similar to the method I showed you at the beginning, but much more difficult, and it's much more common that you'll fail this method. You have to be facing the sign just enough, and you have to time that charge jump perfectly. If you're even just slightly not facing the sign enough, or you slightly mistime the charge jump, you can very easily fail this one, and if you do fail this one, it's very punishing. And even if you do make it, since you can't get an air trick to get a boost on the landing of the rail, you'll go quite slow when you initially land on the railing, meaning it's pretty easy for the players behind you to shroom up and just knock you off. So I'd only recommend going for this one if you have a lot of space in the front, preferably first, and also only if you're very confident doing this. And bear in mind, if you don't want to do any of the versions of the rail shortcut that I talked about, if you have a feather, you can very simply just feather over the tires. Next up is Crown City. This track is huge, having 3 whole unique sections to it. Admittedly though, there's not many shortcuts that are worth talking about. We're starting off with a pretty cool one though. You can skip this entire S-turn section with just a single feather. Go out wide on this turn, charge jump onto this wall, trick onto this lamppost, hold left midair and then use your feather, aim to land onto this roof, trick off the roof, and you've done it. This one has some precise inputs and a lot of surprising ways to fail it, so let's talk about it. Usually coming up to this turn, you go tight of this pole and trick off this ramp, but to have enough space to get your charge jump in time, you're going to want to go wide, trick off this ledge and immediately start a charge jump. As you're coming up to this window, steer right into it. It's a bit hard to see, but you want to aim to right charge jump onto the first line on the window, then briefly wall ride on that window until you come up to the end of it, then trick off. If you've done that correctly, you should trick off this lamppost for some needed extra height. Then hold left and do left air tricks, but don't go too tight over the crowd beneath you because that's out of bounds. Then once you dip just below the second tree's leaves, use your feather. That will give you enough height to make it onto this roof. Then make sure to stay on the left side of the roof so you don't go out of bounds. Then simply trick back onto the main road. This is one of the most effective feather shortcuts in the game, and it makes this track extremely runnable if you can get one. As I said though, there are a lot of fail methods to this, so you have to be careful. The timing of the wall ride then trick onto the lamppost is quite harsh and does take a bit of practice. If you go slightly too tight after that, you'll go out of bounds. If you slightly mistime the feather, you won't make it onto the roof. If you go slightly too tight on the roof, you'll go out of bounds. And kind of a rare way of failing, but it's happened to me a couple times while recording this footage, is getting onto this rope, which is a direct path to the out of bounds. You always have to consciously remember to not go out of bounds here because it is very harsh, but this is an incredible feather shortcut if you can get it down. And there's one more thing to mention about the big S turn here. If you have absolutely no item whatsoever, it is actually faster to drift out wide here, start a charge jump, do a left charge jump into this tree getting over the entire patch of grass, and then do a big hop into the second patch of grass and then just drift through it. And because the off-road here isn't actually that harsh, this is faster than going around otherwise. And it's really easy to pull off. You just have to make sure your aim is good enough to actually get onto the first tree and to not run into any of the boxes. And there's one more shortcut on Crown City, and it's actually right after the previous one. Get onto this green railing, you can get some extra tricks, and then left up at the very end of it, trick off this palm tree and then land on this platform to cut off the patch of grass. This one is very easy to do and absolutely necessary if you're in the front and you have no mushrooms. The main ways in which you can fail it is getting greedy with the extra tricks beforehand. If you're not comfortable with them, you don't have to do them at all. And also timing the left top at the end. You need to be careful not to time it incorrectly so you don't hit this lamppost. You won't outright fail the cut if you hit this lamppost, but you'll take a much slower version. The absolute perfect timing is to do a left trick right before this little bump on the railing at the very end of it. And I found that's the most consistent way to do the left trick and avoid the lamppost entirely. Additionally, since this is a railing and sometimes it can be a bit risky to take online, you can also do this shortcut by not taking the railing. Simply go out a little bit wide, steer in left and trick off this little bump in the road. Then you can wall ride onto the left side roof doing a slightly improvised version. Just make sure not to go too left on the roof because the out of bounds is not forgiving at all. This shortcut is absolutely worth it to learn though because it's a really big time save. It's very easy to do and it's also pretty flexible, so if you can't take it from the railing, you can also do it from the main road. Right lads, a quick editor's note from me. So as of right now, I'm very close to actually completing the video fully, and it has been discovered that there is a much easier way to do that really complicated feather shortcut. You can basically just do the regular no item S-turn sequence, but then when you hop over the second patch of grass, use your feather, go to the right, land on this roof as usual, trick off it, and that's way easier and I'm pretty sure a little bit faster than the previous feather method I showed you. I'm leaving that in because I made such a good tutorial for it. I feel like it would be a bit of a waste. But yeah, as of right now, I'd recommend learning this instead of that method. Okay, now we're going to Whistlestop Summit, and it is absolutely essential that you learn this track shortcut if you want to win. First up, at the beginning, if you get onto this yellow railing, trick off it, trick off the edge of the platform, wall ride off this rock, then trick off it, you can get a decent little turn skip. This one looks simple, but it does require some precise inputs, and if done slightly incorrectly, can be failed quite easily. So first up, of course, you have to get onto this yellow railing. You can get some extra trick boost, but they're not necessary at all. Then as soon as your vehicle passes this bump on the yellow railing, trick off it. Gradually start holding left and then trick off the very edge of the platform. Then you'll want to aim to wall ride off the leftmost side of the rock. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a very faint line here. On the left side of it, you cannot wall ride, and on the right side, you can. So you want to aim for just to the right side of this line. Then once you wall ride on the rock, as soon as your vehicle gets to this line, trick off the rock, then immediately hold right and start spamming right air tricks. And if done right, you should comfortably land on this left side railing. This is the safest method, and if pulled off right, is 100% consistent. I would say this is the easiest shortcut I'm going to talk about on this track, but it's also the least necessary as well. So if you're incredibly confident with this one, this is a great one to go for every single time you play this track, as it is a free time save. But if you're not absolutely 100% confident and you don't need to go for it, then just don't bother. Always consider the risk reward factor of this one. Okay, next up, after where the second item set is, you can drift around this turn and charge a super mini turbo, and then use that super mini turbo boost to charge jump over this gap. And even with the rough landing, it is way faster than going around. Okay, now let's get into the more specific method. So when you're drifting around this turn, you're going to want to make sure you're soft drifting as much as you can, so you can get that super mini turbo as fast as you can. You'll also want to make sure you don't drift in too tight. Make sure you're wide enough to take that coin. You'll want to make sure you're out wide here and you have your super mini turbo by the time you're coming up to this shadow. When you get to the shadow, release your super mini turbo and immediately start a charge jump. Start steering left, and as soon as your vehicle passes this white line on the wooden plank, do a left charge jump, do another left air trick, and then when you land, keep on holding hard left until you stick to this railing, and then you've done it. You need to drift at quite a precise angle, and you also need to soft drift quite well to 1, get a good lineup for the gap jump, and 2, to even get the super mini turbo boost for it in the first place. So both these elements of the shortcut are going to take you quite a bit of practice potentially, and sometimes you might clip the edge of this rock if you take it slightly too tight. Try and avoid this if you can, because it gives you a much worse landing after the gap, which is a good bit slower. And if you want to get really fancy with the gap jump, if you charge jump at the latest possible opportunity, opportunity, you can clip the road when you land on the other side, which actually gives you a much better angle, and technically is the fastest method of taking the gap jump, but of course this is very risky for a pretty minimal time save. The move here is to get the original method that I showed you down consistently, because if you can get the angle right and your soft drifting is good enough, it's actually a really simple shortcut to pull off. And one last thing about the gap jump, you can feather over it. And it's way easier than the charge jump method because you literally just have to drift off the ledge and use your feather. And it's as easy as that, and it's really, really fast. This is by far the best feather spot on the entire track, so if you have one, always save it for the gap jump. Okay, finally, the most important shortcut on the track by far, the ending rail shortcut. If you can pull this one off, it's even faster than taking the mushroom shortcut at the end. This one single-handedly makes it so this track is actually pretty good for the front if you can play it perfectly. And of course, as expected, this shortcut is the most difficult one out of the bunch. So let me show you how to do it. Right trick onto this railing here. Then once you get in between the second and third yellow line, do a left trick. As soon as you've done that left trick, immediately shift from holding left to holding right. And as soon as you see your vehicle go over this white line, let go of A and start holding B. Then coming up to the wall, you'll want to aim your vehicle at this bump. And then when your vehicle is in between the last two yellow lines, preferably a bit more nearer the last one, very quickly trick off the wall, start holding neutral, and then shake your controller, which will allow you to get a really high neutral trick. You'll then want to aim to land onto this green or teal railing, and then very quickly right hop onto the wall and then hop back onto this railing. And if you make it onto this railing, you've done it. You can then also do an extra right trick on the railing, but trust me, it's not necessary at all. As you can probably tell, this method is extremely complicated, but the great thing about it is that if you can pull it off perfectly, it is 100% consistent. So if you can learn this could become a very strong track for you. Of course, there are a lot of ways in which you can fail this though. If your fail looks something like this, you didn't start braking in time. If your fail looks something like this, you went too low on the wall, or you started holding B too early. And then if your fail looks like this, you tricked off the teal railing too late. This is one of the most complicated shortcuts in the game. If you get it down though, you really get it down, and it is 100% consistent if you get all the steps right. And knowing this is really going to make the difference for you on this course, so I would highly recommend learning it if you can. Also, I've got to give the necessary credit to Shortcat for actually discovering this. He's got an entire video dedicated to this track on his channel where he goes over this shortcut. He explains it really well, and he has his controller inputs on the screen, so if my explanation doesn't help you, his probably will. So I'll leave a link for his video down in the description. And there's one more method of this shortcut that you might find more comfortable because it's less complicated, but that's with the drawback of it's less consistent. As soon as your vehicle passes this yellow line, do a left trick, and then do another left air trick onto the wall, and then as soon as your vehicle gets on this line of bricks, trick off the wall onto the corner of this green sign. If you've angled yourself correctly, you should clip off it and get a boost at the same time. You can then do a right trick onto the teal railing, right trick onto the wall, and then trick onto the final railing. This method is technically a bit faster and a lot more simple to pull off. The only problem is you need to get a boost and clip off the green sign at the same time, which no matter what you do is not consistent. You could supposedly get a really good angle, but just miss out on getting the boost, resulting in you failing the shortcut altogether. This for some people might be more comfortable than the other method though, because it has a lot less steps to it. So if you're more comfortable with this method, then by all means go for it. Generally, I would recommend the other method though, because even though it's way more complicated, if you can get all the steps right, no doubt you will make it. Whereas with the other method, it's very easy to just not get the boost off the sign, and if you don't get it, you just won't make it at all. Okay, the final track of the Mushroom Cup is DK Spaceport, which compared to the last track we talked about, Whistlestop Summit, there's really nothing going on here, to be honest. At the beginning, you can do this gap jump, which is decent. You very simply drift out wide, go in tight, release your mini turbo, and then trick off the edge of the road here. And additionally, you can also do this from the top path if you want to get an item box. Overall, it saves you a decent amount of time. If you're front running in first, you might as well go for it. It is at the very beginning of the race though, so it's not that significant. And very soon after, you can also do a small gap jump by, instead of going around and taking this ramp, steer to the right early, trick off these two bolts, right trick in the air, and you can land back on the platform easy peasy. I'll be honest, both of these are very easy and they won't take you that long to learn at all. And finally, because we only have one more thing to talk about, is doing the mushroom shortcuts with a feather, which again is very simple. Drift out wide, go in in tight, and as you're coming up to the edge of the platform, release your mini turbo and use your feather, and you should very easily make it across the gap. You just have to be careful of going too tight. If you go too tight, that will be out of bounds, and that's especially the case on the second to last off-road shortcut. You don't really have that much breathing room on this particular one compared to all the other ones. If you go ever so slightly too tight, you'll be out of bounds, and you can also very easily clip the off-road here, which will also result in you failing it. Generally, I'd say except for the second to last off-road shortcuts, all of these can very easily be done with a feather. And yeah, that's it for DK Spaceport. There's genuinely just nothing going on here. There are shortcuts on this track, but it's just mushroom shortcuts, so nothing really that interesting to talk about. Okay, next up is the Flower Cup, and that means we're going to Desert Hills. This track definitely has more fancy tech on it than you'd assume, and interestingly, pretty much all of it is in the final section. So first up, you can do this entire mushroom shortcut without a mushroom by going out wide, starting a charge jumping onto this pillar, and then landing and tricking off this platform. This one really is as simple as I described it if you can get the line down correctly. What I like to do when I initially drift out wide is aim for this coin. If you drift out wide into this coin, it gives you the best alignment possible. And then it really is as simple as starting a charge jump on the landing, doing a charge jump off the right side of the pillar, and then landing on the edge of this platform and then tricking off it onto the main road. The main two ways you'll be failing this is getting a bad line into the pillar, which again can be very easily avoided if you remember what I said about drifting into the coin. And also you might try and charge jump a bit too early, which can result in you getting an air trick, which if you do get one, the trick boost can boost you ahead so much to the point where you can't even get your charge jump out. You can still get it out, it's just cutting it a lot closer and it's a lot riskier. Overall though, this one is a really big time save and really simple to pull off once you get it down. Next up, there's another shroomless shortcut. Instead of cutting off the last turn with a mushroom, you can instead drift out wide, charge a super mini turbo, and then use that mini turbo boost to get a huge charge jump. You can then do this wall ride, get over these boxes, and you've done it. This one, just like the last one, is a really big time save and is very simple to pull off if you can do all the steps correctly. So when you start drifting on the turn, you're going to want to make sure you're soft drifting as much as you possibly can be, and also make sure you don't go too tight. Once you start approaching where the road turns left, you'll see this very faint shadow on the ground. When you're about to go over it, that's when you're going to want to release your super mini turbo and immediately start a charge jump. Hold left in the charge jump, and then when you get to the curb on the uphill, do a left charge jump, aim to wall ride off the cliff that is faced diagonally from your vehicle, and if you've done all that correctly, you should comfortably get over these boxes, and you'll safely land in the water, completing the shortcut. This one takes practice because there are many ways in which you can fail this one. If you don't get your super mini turbo out in time, you'll fail it, and if you don't get the right alignment, again, you'll fail it. And failing this one is extremely punishing, so you have to get this one right. But if you do get it down, it's very consistent and it makes this track extremely runnable, so for sure this one is worth learning. And finally, after doing this mushroom shortcut, you can then very quickly charge jump onto this railing, hop onto the second one, right hop off it, and use a second mushroom to pull off an extremely fast sequence with only 2 mushrooms. If you have mushrooms on this section of the track, this is the absolute best way to utilize them, so for sure this one is worth knowing. So when you take the first mushroom shortcut, make sure that by the time your mushroom boost ends, you're angled very tight, and as soon as that boost ends, start a charge jump and hold hard right, and as you're coming up to the wall, as your vehicle is about to be fully in the off-road, do a right charge jump onto the wall, which will get you onto the railing. And then once you hit the second coin on the railing, do a neutral trick that will perfectly align you to get onto the second railing. And on the second railing, as soon as your back wheel touches the first black nudge, do a right trick, keep holding right until you have a good alignment, then shroom on the landing. You can get a couple tricks, then you'll land in the water, and then you've done it. There's just a couple things to watch out for on this one. Firstly, you need to make sure you're angled tight enough to get a high enough wall ride to actually get on the first railing, and you also need to make sure you get a good trick off the second railing. If you get a slightly suboptimal trick though, that will probably only mean you don't get to do the extra tricks before you get into the water, which is slower, but it's not awful by any means. Overall, again, this one really is not that bad once you get it down. Also, it's good to note that everything I talked about here can be improvised with a feather. You might be in a situation where you have to use a feather for one of these shortcuts, so you should also definitely give them a practice. Okay, next up is Guy Bazaar, and this track is all about rails. First up, at the very beginning of the race, you can hold hard right, trick onto this railing, then trick onto this railing to take a much faster line than you would be otherwise. This one isn't that challenging to pull off at all. Truly, all you need to do is trick off the bump in the sand onto the rail. As the rail turns right, you can do a right trick for an extra boost, but this is not necessary at all. And once your vehicle gets to this coin, do a neutral trick. That will give you the perfect alignment to get onto this railing. Once you get this one down, it's very difficult to fail this one. The one that caught me out early on was the hop onto the second railing, but as long as you know to do a neutral trick on this coin, you'll be fine. Also, if you try and do this at the beginning of a race in online play, there's a good chance everyone else is also going to go for this, so you just need to be careful that you don't get pushed off by the other players. Anyway, right after this, there's some really fancy tech that you can do. Go to the right side railing, right hop off near the end of it, go on this wall and detach off it, do a left trick off this railing, keep going and then start a right drift on this turn. As you bend around the corner, start a charge jump and do a right charge jump off this ramp. You'll land on this platform and skip the following turn entirely. This is by far the fastest way to drive this section of the track, and it's complicated, but I'd say it's definitely worth knowing. Soon after tricking onto this left side railing, right trick onto the right side railing, and around when you get to this coin, do a right trick. Then you're going to want to aim to wall ride in the middle of the upcoming wall. Let yourself automatically detach off the wall. Quickly do a right air trick and then left trick off the railing as soon as you land on it. Hold left, do some more air tricks and aim to land on this railing. Get some more tricks and then on the landing of this wooden platform, do a right drift. And as you're coming up to the second coin, let go of your drift and immediately start a charge jump. When you're in your charge jump, make sure you're out a little bit wide and start holding right, going in tight. And once you get to the middle of the boost ramp, in between the third and the fourth arrow, do a right charge jump, then immediately spam another air trick. And even with the bad landing, the trick boost should help you get back up to speed. And with that, you've cut off the turn and you've done it. This one is very, very complicated, has a lot of steps to it. If you can just do all the steps correctly though, this one can very feasibly be pulled off. The main thing you're going to have to practice is the charge jump though. That's one that got me for a long time. Every other step of this shortcut is pretty easy to get the hang of, but the charge jump is actually very precise, so that will take you a little bit of practice. And lastly, this isn't really much of a shortcut, but coming up to this boost ramp, it's actually much faster for you to go to the left side and take these railings than staying on the main road. Again, I'm not really sure if it counts as a shortcut that much, but it's really easy to do. It's a lot faster, and I thought I might as well mention it. Why not? And one last thing for Shy Guy Bazaar, there are quite a few feather shortcuts you can do. Firstly, if you're not all about doing that last charge jump shortcut that I talked about, you can instead right drift and trick off the last ramp and use a feather. That will get you onto this rope, completing the turn skip and even getting you an item box. Next, literally straight after that, you can use a feather before this turn to get on this railing to take the turn a good bit tighter than you usually would. Another good time save and another super simple feather shortcut to pull off. And lastly, again, super simple, you can feather over the last bit of sand on the last turn. A pretty good alternative if you have a feather instead of a mushroom. Shy Guy Bazaar is truly a track where you're going to be losing so much to your competitors. So if you want to win, getting everything down here is absolutely crucial. Next up is Wario Stadium, a track that is also all about rails. First up, once again, at the very start of the race, you can wall ride up here and get onto this rail, do a left trick off it, wall ride again up here and get onto this rail, get a bunch of extra tricks and then get a massive left trick off it, get onto this railing and then hop back on the track. This is by far the fastest way to drive the starting section of this course, and it just makes it a whole lot more exciting in general. So what you want to do at the start is going off the first ramp, do a shake trick in the air. Off the second ramp, again, shake your controller in the air to do an air trick. And once you're coming up to the third ramp, you'll want to steer in left a bit more. Be angled towards the pink wall and trick off the last ramp where the dirt meets the road. You should easily get up to this yellow railing. Then left trick off this yellow railing, only when you pass this grey bit at the absolute earliest. Hold left all the way and spam left air tricks. Then you'll want to trick off the black and yellow line of this ramp. then wall ride up to the second yellow railing. Once you get on it, right before this black nudge on the railing as it's about to turn to the right, do a right trick, and the exact same again on the right side, do a left trick. Get 2 more tricks on the straightaway, and as your vehicle hits this black nudge at the very end of the railing, do a left trick, then immediately start holding right. Then as your vehicle starts to drop, start holding left again and do some left air tricks. This will give you the perfect angle to land onto the third yellow railing. You can then do a trick on the landing, then do a right trick as it's bending around the corner to safely get back onto the main road. This one certainly had a lot of steps to it, but this one's really consistent and easy if you can get it down. The main fail methods would be hopping off the first yellow railing too early and going out of bounds, messing up the timing of the right and left trick on the second yellow railing, tricking too late off the end of the second railing, which will cause you to get a neutral trick. Not an awful fail, but you do lose a good bit of time. And finally, not maneuvering properly in the air, causing you to either not get to stick to the third railing, or maybe even going out of bounds entirely. If you could just get everything right, which isn't too hard to do if you can follow all the steps correctly, you will find yourself almost never failing this in an online setting. Okay, next up, what's known as the Vela Strat. Coming up to this ramp, you can start a charge jump and then charge jump off this coin, and that will give you enough of a boost to get onto this railing, which is by far the fastest way to take this turn. This is called the Vela Strat because of the top French player called Vela who discovered it, and without a doubt, it's the most important shortcut to know on this course. And it's pretty simple. As you're drifting around this turn, release your mini turbo and immediately start a charge jump. Ideally, when you've bended around the corner and started your charge jump, you'll want to be just to the left side of this middle line on the ramp here. And you're also going to want to angle yourself so you're driving into this coin. And once you take that coin, release your charge jump at the exact same time, then aim to get onto the right side wall above this white danger sign. And if you do, you'll just get enough height to get onto the top yellow railing. And from there, you just need to stay on the railing and you've done it. By far, the most common way you'll be failing this is not getting enough height on the wall. The main 2 ways that this can happen is firstly, if you're too parallel to the wall. If you're not facing the wall enough, your vehicle won't go upwards enough on the wall to get onto the railing. So on the turn beforehand, you need to make sure you can position yourself just a little bit wide. And even if you're facing the wall enough, you might not be getting enough height because you're not landing on the wall high enough. As I said, to get enough height, you need to make sure your vehicle lands above the white danger sign. If you land on it, you almost certainly won't get enough height. So if you can 1, be facing the wall enough, and 2, land above the white sign, you will undoubtedly make this one. And if you do feel a bit uncomfortable with this one and you have a mushroom or a mega mushroom, if you use a mushroom on the wall, it's a lot more flexible. And with a mega mushroom, you don't even need to charge jump. You can just trick and wall ride up to the rail easy peasy. This one is a massive time save over driving on the regular road though, so I would highly recommend learning this one if you can. And finally, this track's best feather spot, you can take the ending mushroom shortcut with a feather by literally just drifting into it and using the feather. The only thing to note here is that you do have to skim the off-road a little bit. If you don't, your feather will overshoot you and you'll get a bit of a bad landing. But yeah, this one's pretty good to know because feathers aren't really that great anywhere else on this course. Okay, the last track of the Flower Cup is Airship Fortress. Again, a track that is all about railings. At the very beginning of the race, you can hop onto this left railing, get a bunch of tricks and do a massive leap onto the right side railing, get some more tricks and get a high trick off the chain, get onto this red railing, get some more tricks and hop off. This one is way faster than taking the main road, and in all honesty, is really easy to learn. The only thing you really need to know is the big leap from the left side railing to the right side railing, which isn't too bad. Just make sure you have a trick boost and do a right trick when the rail is bending around the turn. In the footage I've shown you, I've done a lot of extra tricks, but most of them aren't really that necessary at all. And doing these tricks are the most common ways in which you can fail this one. So getting all the tricks are a good bit faster, but if you don't feel comfortable doing them, you don't have to do them at all. Also, if you are starting in first, you'll start on the right side of the track. So it's actually going to be better for you to initially take this right side railing and then left trick off it, trick off this ramp, and then get onto the left side railing and then continue as normal. Overall though, this is by far the fastest way to drive the start of Airship Fortress, so it's an absolute must know. Okay, next is the fast version of the ending mushroom shortcut. You can start a charge jump, use your mushroom, and do a left charge jump onto this railing, which is a good bit faster than how you take the shortcut otherwise. To make sure you're lined up for it correctly, as your vehicle passes this darker strip of road, release your mini turbo and angle yourself to the right side of the straightaway. As soon as you get to that straightaway, start a charge jump and slowly steer to the left. And as you're coming up to the off-road, use your mushroom and keep holding left. And as you're coming up to the ledge, do a left charge jump, aiming for this railing. And if you've angled yourself correctly, you should stick onto this railing, completing it. This one is very easy not to fail. Literally just make sure you don't mistime your charge jump, and also make sure you're tight enough so you can actually stick onto the railing. And finally, I'm going to talk about all the different methods of the ending shortcuts with a feather. So if you have a feather coming up to the end of the lap on either lap 1 or lap 2, you can very simply just drift into this strip of road, release your mini turbo and use your feather, aim for this rail, and you'll complete the shortcut. This one's extremely easy. You'll get the hang of it if you practice it in no time. Now, what's a little bit more difficult but a good bit faster is the lap 3 feather, and you're about to see why you can only do it on the last lap. So you're going to want to angle yourself to come up to this railing, do a left charge jump onto it, quickly do a left trick off it, hold left midair, use your feather, and you'll just be able to finish the race right before you go out of bounds. This one is fairly precise and has a good amount of ways in which you can fail it, so let's go over it. So this time, to get a good alignment, you'll want to release your mini turbo down the spiral a bit later, pretty much as soon as that railing comes in your line of sight. You'll want to make sure your vehicle is angled to the right side of it, and then you'll want to immediately start a charge jump. Then left charge jump onto near the end of the railing. Keep on holding left and immediately shake your controller as you get onto the railing. That will let you get an immediate, really fast left trick. Keep on holding hard left and do some left air tricks. And then your vehicle will start to dip down, then use your feather, and you'll want to aim your vehicle to crash into this connector that's in between this pillar and the main road. And if you do all of that correctly, you'll always just finish the race right before you go out of bounds. For this one, you just need to make sure you release that mini turbo late enough so you have a good enough angle to get that charge jump out in time. Make sure you don't go too late on the railing so you can get that left trick off it. And make sure you don't go too tight mid-air. If you go to the left side of the pillar, you'll go out of bounds and you won't finish the race. It's extremely crucial that you go in between the pillar and the main road, like I said. If you can figure this one out though, and you ever get a feather in this situation, then this is one of the most insane ways to finish a race in the entire game. Okay, next is the Star Cup, so that means we're going to DK Pass. And at the beginning, right after the first item set, you can drift around this turn, start a charge jump and wall ride up this wall, trick off the wall onto the snow, steer left out the snow, do a wall ride, and that entire sequence is much faster than going around. This one isn't as hard as it looks and is 100% consistent if you can get everything down right. So coming up to this turn, you're going to want to take it wide. Drifting and taking these 2 coins is a good way to do that. Release your mini turbo really tight onto this red and white strip. Immediately start a charge jump and aim to angle yourself just to the left of this line. Right as you come up to the wall, charge jump straight onto the wall. You should get a very good angle and should be wall riding quite far up the wall. Then shortly after charging an orange mini turbo on the wall, do a trick. Hold slightly left midair and aim to land in between this dead tree and the signs, preferably a bit more left towards the signs. Then when you land in the snow, keep on holding left. Then when you get back to the main road, you can trick off the ledge just to the right side of this red and white strip. And again, as soon as you get an orange mini turbo off the wall, you can trick back off it onto the main road, and you've done it. This shortcut is a lot easier than you'd think and is a lot faster than going around the main road otherwise. But there is quite a few ways in which you might be failing this that you need to look out for. If you're not facing the wall enough, you'll go too wide and you'll either get a really bad landing or land on this rail, which both are very, very slow. And of course, if you're facing the wall too much, you just won't get the wall ride entirely. So that does take a good bit of practice to get the hang of. And honestly, that's the main amount of trouble you'll get from this one. The main challenge is getting that wall ride angle down to perfection, which once you get the hang of it, really isn't that bad. Okay, pretty much straight after the last one, going into the tree section, you can left trick off this railing, landing, wall ride, and trick onto this tree, trick off that, and then trick off this second tree, land and drift through this bit of snow, and this is by far the fastest way to drive this section. It might seem like a bit of a complicated one again, but it's not too bad, and if you can get all the steps right, it is 100% consistent. So as you drift around the turn, release an orange mini turbo and aim for this left side railing on the ramp, and as soon as your vehicle hits the third black square, do a left trick, very briefly wall ride off the left side wall and then trick off it. Aim to trick off the right side of the first tree, then aim your vehicle to trick off the second tree. Keep on holding hard left mid-air, then you'll land back on the main road, and it's as simple as drifting through this bit of snow, and then you've done it. This is honestly quite a flexible strat and fairly hard to fail once you get it down. The main things you need to watch out for are not tricking off the rail too late so you can actually get the left trick. If you trick too late, you'll only be able to get a neutral trick, and also don't trick onto the first tree too high. You might not have noticed, but at the top of the tree there's this power line, which counts as a grind rail. And if you stick to it, you'll get a really bad angle. So yeah, the main things to watch out for is don't trick off the first rail too late, and don't trick onto the first tree too high. Also, since taking the railing does skip an item, there is an alternative method to doing this if you need to get an item box. After tricking off the ramp and taking the item box, what you can do is aim for this railing on the ground, and as soon as you get onto it, do a neutral trick, hold left in the air, aim to trick off this tree, and you'll get the exact same landing as the previous method. This one isn't quite as fast as the other method, but of course you get an item box from doing this one, and generally this one is a good bit easier, so if you're struggling with the original method, this one might be the one for you. In any case, knowing how to do either method is much faster than just driving the track normally. And finally, by far this track's best feather spot, the ending shortcut that you'd usually take with a mushroom can very easily be done with a feather. It's as simple as going out wide, releasing a mini turbo, and feathering over the shortcut. This one is really simple, it's not going to take you that much practice to get down, but you do have to be very careful of the one fail method here. And I speak from experience here because I've fell victim to this multiple times. If you go even slightly too tight here, Lakitu picks you up. The general consensus is that you don't want to go too tight over these signs here. If you stay wide of them, you're almost certainly going to be fine. This can very easily catch you off guard though, because it feels like you're taking a normal line. So whenever you're going for this one, just hammer it into your brain. Don't go too tight, or else Lakitu will pick me up. Alright, the next track is Starview Peak, and there's only really one thing here worth talking about. And that's the big snow shortcut on the water section. Very simply, if you're using your mushroom and taking the turn like this, you're doing it very incorrectly and you're losing a lot of time. Instead, coming up to the snow, start a charge jump, shroom into the snow, and then charge jump onto this fence. Trick off the fence, and that's literally it. This is by far the fastest method of taking this off-road shortcut, and in all honesty, it's really not that bad to get the hang of. And it should be noted that you can take this shortcut while chaining your mushroom into this box. It does make the charge jump timing just a little bit more precise, but it's not that bad at all. And there are two more things I'd like to mention about this particular shortcut. So you can do it with a feather. The best method I found was to trick right at the edge of the water here and then feather onto the railing. If you do it just right, you can just get enough height to get onto the railing. I found this one to be quite inconsistent though, and falling off here is really punishing because water respawns in this game are extremely slow. So generally, unless something more consistent is discovered, I wouldn't risk this online at all. And finally, you can actually do this whole shortcut without any item whatsoever. This is done in the world record. You can stick to this right side road, trick off the ledge, and just wall ride off the very edge of the snow, and trick get a bunch of height and get onto the railing. This is really cool and really fast, but unfortunately, it's extremely difficult, extremely precise, and of course, extremely punishing. So I would not recommend going for this online because it's great if you make it, but it's race losing if you don't make it. And most likely you're just not going to be making this one on a consistent basis. Okay, next up is High Sundae, and just like Starview Peak, there's only one thing here that's worth talking about, and that's the wall ride on the very last turn. So there's a way safer method that's just a little bit slower, and then there's also a way riskier method that's just a little bit faster. better. So first up, the way safer method. It's as simple as tricking off the ledge here, holding right midair so you stick onto the right side wall, getting some tricks on the wall, tricking back onto the main road, and it's as simple as that. This is one of, if not the easiest thing I'll mention in this video. If you're familiar with the physics of wall riding in this game, you'll have no trouble with this at all. Okay, now here's how to do the more difficult version. That's just a bit faster. From this ramp, trick onto this pink rail, then trick off the end of the pink rail and immediately get a right air trick. You need to trick off the end of it to get a full trick boost off the rail, and you also need to do the right air trick to get the correct alignment. When you land from the trick off the rail, immediately start a charge jump on the landing, and at the tail end of your trick boost, pretty much as soon as you get your charge jump, do a left charge jump off the ramp and then immediately transition into holding right in the air. Steer right and try and get onto the wall as soon as you possibly can, and if you've done that correctly, you will have gotten onto the wall in time, so you have enough height to stick to it, get a bunch of tricks off it, and then get back to the main road safely. This one is obviously a lot more challenging than the safe method, but this one can be a free time save if you learn everything correctly, because if you do, although this one is challenging, it is 100% consistent. Now, the main fail methods you're going to be looking at are 1. Mistiming the trick off the pink railing. This will most likely cause you to not get a full trick boost. If that happens, you won't fail the wall ride entirely. That just means you can't go for the fast method anymore, and you'll have to go for the safe method. And the next one is your air movements after the left charge jump. After doing your left charge jump, your goal is to get onto the wall as soon as possible. The quicker you can get onto it, the higher up on it you're going to be. And of course, if you don't get a high enough landing on the wall, then you'll fail. It's very good to note here that the more coins that you have, the easier it's going to be to get a high landing on the wall. So consider that when you're considering the risk-reward factor when going for it. But this one is especially good for front running if you can learn it. This one's generally not recommended to go for if you're in the mid-pack or the back, because you do skip the item box entirely going for this, and not to mention that you could get bumped off by other players very easily if you try this. But this is absolutely worth it to go for in first if you can do it consistently, because over the duration of 3 laps, you'll save a good amount of time on your opponents behind you. Okay, the next one and the final track of the Star Cup is Wario's Galleon, or if you're from North America, Wario's Shipyard. And right at the very beginning, after the first turn, you can charge jump off this boost ramp and angle yourself midair to trick off this palm tree and immediately do a wall jump that will give you enough height to cut off the entire bit of off-road beneath you. This one is fairly simple and absolutely imperative to learn if you want to start off strong on this track. So coming up to the boost ramp, of course, start a charge jump, and then once your entire vehicle goes over the boost ramp, do a neutral charge jump on the right side of it, then gradually steer right, making sure you're angled with this palm tree, and right as you're about to hit the palm tree, do a right air trick, then immediately shake your controller to do an instant wall jump off this wall. Keep on holding right midair, staying just to the left side of this wall, and if you've done that correctly, you should skip the entire bit of off-road beneath you and land back in the water. This shortcut, compared to many others, is a fairly simple one, I'd say, but there are definitely a couple ways in which you could be failing this. For example, getting that correct angle from the palm tree into the wall is absolutely essential. You just need to make sure you're going in tight enough so you can actually get onto the wall. That's why I said to do the right air trick right before you hit the palm tree, as it helps with that greatly. And then after the wall jump, you need to make sure you're staying just to the left side of the cliff. The general consensus, if you can get the air movements right, you'll absolutely nail this one with no issues at all. Okay, coming up to the next section of the track, it's pretty much nothing but water. And as we know, water driving in Mario Kart World is extremely slow. So instead, what you can do is charge jump onto this rail, left trick off the very end of it, trick off this palm tree, and land back in the water after skipping a good chunk of it. This shortcut, if you learn it, is absolutely free, and it's way faster than driving in the water otherwise. It is truly as simple as starting a charge jump beforehand, charge jumping onto the rail, and doing a left trick near the end of the rail, and then aiming for this palm tree. That's it. It's not that complicated at all. There is one particular way in which you could fail this, though, that does happen quite often. You see, the water on this track has waves, and they gradually get bigger as the laps go on. And a very common way to fail this one is if you get an air pocket from one of those waves, and you try to release your charge jump in one of those air pockets, which you can't release a charge jump mid-air, so obviously you won't get the charge jump, and you'll end up crashing straight into the rock. So even though this strat might be extremely free for you on lap 1 and maybe even lap 2, this could very easily happen to you with how big the waves get on the final lap. So specifically when the waves get bigger, this one is for sure worth practicing. Okay, now straight after that, on the landing, there's this big patch of off-road, which you tend to use a mushroom to get through to do a nice little mushroom shortcut. But you can actually get through this entire bit of off-road without any items whatsoever by just hopping through it. And this really isn't as precise as you'd think it is. So to do this, you need to do a shake trick out of the water into the off-road. You do a shake trick to ensure you get the highest possible trick out of the water. Then as you go through the off-road, spam the ZR button as fast as you can. That's literally it. If you're a really quick button masher, you'll get the hang of this in no time. The only things to note here that you absolutely need to get right are the water trick into the off-road. As I said, you do a shake trick into it to get the highest possible water trick, because the higher of a trick you get into it, the more of the off-road you're going to clear. And then it's just a case of how good you are at mashing your ZR button. That's kind of it. Just practice mashing that button and you can get this down. And if you're maybe not that good of a button masher, you can try and time the hops instead. But I generally have found doing it that way is a bit more inconsistent. So if it works for you, it works for you, but generally I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, next is the ending rail strat, which is as simple as tricking onto this rail, right hopping onto this rail, right hopping off that rail back onto the main road. It's another simple concept of water driving is bad, so you do anything you can to skip the water. The only thing to note here is that it's a little bit faster to trick off the far left side of the ramp, as you'll get a bit more of an upwards angle, and that does actually save you time. Other than that, it's as simple as I described it, really. Okay, and the last thing to talk about, again, something very simple but worth mentioning. At the very end of the race, the final lap I'm talking about, instead of driving on the track normally, you can trick off this ramp and aim to do a wall ride right here. Keep that wall ride and you'll detach after you finish the race. And this is the fastest way for you to end a race on this track. As long as you're comfortable with the driving in this game, this one's so easy to get the hang of. And although this is the fastest way to finish the race, it's not the fastest by a landslide by any means. So in your situation, if there's any risk involved going for it, or if you're uncomfortable with it by any means, just don't bother. However, if you're in a very close pack and you're comfortable with this one, definitely go for it, because this is going to make the difference 100%. Okay, next is the Shell Cup, and you'll see that Crown City and Peach Stadium are here, but we're not going to be talking about them, as these particular versions are intermission exclusive. So I'll only be going over Koopa Troopa Beach and Faraway Oasis. So starting off with Koopa Troopa Beach, there's really not much to talk about here. The only thing there is to talk about is this mushroom cut. If you take it like this, you're doing it incorrectly. For a much faster version, you can very simply start a charge jump, mushroom into the grass, charge jump through these boxes, and you've taken the shortcut much tighter than you would have otherwise. This one is honestly dead simple. I've not got much to say about it at all. The only thing is you can clip off the left side here a little bit and get a bit of a faster landing. Otherwise, this track is absolutely dead simple. It really is the reincarnation of Baby Park. Okay, next and the last track of the Shell Cup that we're going to talk about is Faraway Oasis. And this track does have a good bit that you need to know if you want to compete. So firstly, coming up to the second item set, there are multiple different ways in which you can go about this section. Firstly, generally what's considered to be the easier method, but it is a bit slower. Get onto this rope in the middle, left trick onto this railing, then left trick, briefly wall ride off this sign, then trick back onto the rail. Then as the rail starts to bend around the turn, do another left trick, then trick off the end of the rail and you're done. This one might seem quite fancy at first glance, but all the trick timings are actually fairly generous. The main thing that might catch you out is the left trick when the rail bends around the turn, but if you get it down, it's really not that much of a problem because, as I said, the trick timing is quite generous here. I like to use this line on the rail as a visual marker, and I pretty much nail it every single time I go for it. Anyway, this is not the fastest way to drive this particular section. Instead, when you get to the rope in the middle, you can do a right trick, do a sharp left drift off the right side of the ramp, get an air trick, start a charge jump on the landing, hold hard left, and then soon after charging your charge jump, do a left charge jump onto the rail. You should be at an angle as to where you don't stick to it. You can then trick off the rail, land on the little strip of road just to the right side of this yellow fence, and that's the absolute fastest way to drive this particular section. This one also is not bad at all if you can get everything down. This one is just a bit more failable than the other method. So there are two main ways in which you might be failing this. Firstly, if you're not facing perpendicular enough to the rail, then you'll stick to it, which will basically mean you're just doing an extra slow version of the previous method that I just talked about. Or you might trick over the rail and not get the trick off it, which isn't an awful fail, but it is a good bit slower than actually landing on the rail and getting that boosted trick off it. This is why I'd recommend doing a left charge jump onto the railing, as it generally gives you the perfect amount of height to get onto it. This one for the most part is pretty simple though. If you can nail down the timings of every single sequence in this particular strat, then you should be having no problems with this at all. Okay, straight after this section of the track, you'll come up to this big river, which as expected, driving on the water here is extremely slow. So you can instead get onto this railing, trick up onto this top path. By doing this, you'll completely skip all of the water, which expectedly is much faster. The main two things you need to know here is how to consistently get onto the rail, and also the trick timing to get onto the top path. So how you get onto the rail depends on the method of the previous section that you did. If you did the first one that I talked about, the slightly easier method, after tricking off the end of the rail, you can shake your controller as you dunk into the water. This will ensure that you get a high trick and comfortably get you onto the rail. And if you did the other method, as you're coming up into the water, you're going to want to start a charge jump and then very simply charge jump onto the rail. And then when you're on the rail, when it starts to incline a bit more here, you can get a trick. And then once the rail goes above this wooden pillar, you can do a neutral trick, and that will comfortably get you onto the top path. And it's also good to note that this is a railing, so you can very easily get hit or pushed off it. So if there's any risk of that happening, you can instead just take this left path and take the top path that way. It is a little bit slower than the rail, but it's still much faster than driving on the water otherwise. Okay, finally, this track's best feather spot by a landslide. You can do the huge ending mushroom shortcut with a feather. And it could not be more simple. Drift out wide, go in tight, release your mini turbo, feather over this wall, and you've done it. This is really simple. It saves you a ton of time, and it makes feathers incredible if you're ever in first on this track. So you can't play this track without knowing this feather shortcut. Okay, next is the Banana Cup, and we're going to Peach Beach. And I'm going to be fully honest, there's hardly anything to talk about, if not anything at all. The only thing that's kind of noteworthy is there's multiple different ways to get up onto this platform on Section 3. If you have no item, you can go to the left here, charge jump onto this rock, and then quickly wall jump onto the platform. Or you can just get onto the platform normally if you have any way of breaking these boxes. For example, that might be a green shell, a horn, or preferably a mushroom. There are a lot of easy ways to get onto this platform, and as we know, road driving is way faster than water driving. So yeah, obviously this would be a bit faster. And that's kind of it, to be honest. This track is not very good. It's more so going to be your items pulling you through here than your actual driving. Okay, next is Salty Speedway, one of the most technical tracks in the entire game. So expectedly, there's going to be quite a few things to go over here. Firstly, the fastest driving sequence from right when you get your starter boost. You can charge jump onto this platform, get a boosted trick off it, then get a water trick onto this platform, then trick off the side of the ramp, get another water trick, and land back onto the main road. This starting strat follows the very common philosophy of water driving is bad, so we avoid it as much as possible. And this one is pretty easy to get the hang of. The main thing you might have trouble with is the water trick onto the second platform. The best and most consistent way I've found to do this is to initially get a trick here on this bit of road when it's about halfway turned to the left. Generally, for this one, if you can get this timing down, you've basically nailed the entire strat, as the rest of it is very, very easy. Okay, literally straight after, you can charge jump onto this waterfall, do a wall jump onto this top platform, keep a tight line on this bit of road, and then trick and wall ride up onto this railing. And that is the fastest and by far the fanciest way to drive this particular section. As I said, it looks very fancy, but this one's really not that hard to get the hang of at all. You'll want to charge jump onto the waterfall just to the left side of this middle water dispenser, and then do your wall jump right where the waterfall ends. You'll want to make sure you've started holding left by this point, and to help with your alignment, do a left air trick right before you land, then charge up your mini turbo, quickly release it. Then from there, you're going to want to aim to trick off the edge of the platform just to the right side of these boxes. That will allow you to get just underneath this railing, which has wall physics, which you can then wall ride up onto the rail and then do a left trick off it. And just like that, you've done it. As I said, this one is actually a lot less difficult and a lot less fancy than it looks. The main things you need to get the hang of are the wall ride and wool trick up onto the platform. If you do everything I said, like jumping onto the waterfall just to the left side of the middle water dispenser, tricking off its right where the waterfall ends, and doing a left air trick right before you land, you should be absolutely fine. And the next most difficult factor is tricking onto the rail, which again is not too bad at all, but it can catch you out if you're not practiced enough. You might go into the rail facing it too perpendicular, like this, and then this will happen. Or you might forget about these boxes and just run into the boxes. Also, it's good to note that sometimes the boxes won't be there in an online situation if other players have already broken them. But when these boxes are broken, oftentimes they do spawn ground items like green shells or bananas. So that is a little something that you do have to be careful of. Okay, now straight after that, you can trick off this ramp, get a quick trick off this teal railing, get a super high right trick off this railing, trick off this pillar, drive off the edge of this platform, get a water trick onto the wall and wall ride up to this railing, left trick off it, and that is the absolute fastest way to drive this particular section of the track, especially because this gets you to the top path, which is much faster, and because you're on a glider for a lot of the ending section is much safer. So this one has a lot of stuff you have to get absolutely right, so let's get into it. After you trick off the wooden ramp, once you get to this teal railing, pretty much as soon as you hit the first coin, trick off it, and then when you get to this rail, you're going to want to do a right trick off it at the latest possible opportunity while it's facing upwards. This is going to give you a super high trick. Then as soon as you go airborne, hold left and do a left air trick. This will then allow you to get the necessary trick off this pillar. Then when you get onto this platform, you're going to want to drive off it normally. Don't do a trick or anything. At around the right side of where the edge of the platform is facing diagonally from you. As you get in the water, start steering right and shake your controller. This will let you get the highest possible trick out of the water. Then you'll attach to this wall, and if you've gotten a high enough trick out of the water, you'll then stick to this rail, which you can simply left trick off, and boom, you're on the top path. This one is actually quite difficult and does take quite a bit to get the hang of. Almost every single part of this sequence is pretty failable. You could get too late of a trick off the first rail. You could get too early of a trick off the second rail and miss the pillar entirely. You could go off the wrong area of this platform. A pretty common one is tricking too much to the left side of it, which can cause you to hit this metal grated road, which will then make it so you can't get a high enough trick out of the water to get onto the top path. This whole sequence generally takes a lot of practice to get the hang of, but if you can get the hang of it, it's extremely good and is by far the fastest way to drive this sequence. If you're not too comfortable with this one and you do want to take the top path, which is recommended, the next best method is literally just to charge jump onto the wall and get onto the railing that way. So if you can learn this super fast method, that would be preferable. If not, just charge jump onto the wall and get onto the top path that way, because the main point is that the top path here is very strong. Okay, next, the various different methods of taking the ending shortcuts from the glider. One of the reasons the glider here is so good is because it gives you a multitude of different ways to take the ending shortcuts. And I'm gonna go through every single one. If you have a feather, as you're coming up to the rail, simply use your feather and that will give you enough height to easily glide onto it. This one is very easy. All you need to do is practice the timing and you've got it. Next, if you have a mushroom at the same place where you'd use a feather, you can use a mushroom and then hold down on your joystick to glide up and then aim to glide onto the rail. Again, this one's really easy. All you really need to practice is the shroom timing and your glide control. Next, if you have a golden and you want to get full use out of it on the rail, as you're bending around the turn on the rail, once you get right here, you can do a right trick and that will perfectly get you onto the next bit of rail. Typically, if you're not boosting here, you'd wait until the rail does that sharp right turn, and then you do a neutral trick over the dividers to get onto the next bit of rail. But if you're goldening because of that boost, you have to do that right trick just a little bit earlier. And finally, probably the most difficult one, but very useful for front running. If you have a green shell, you can glide to the left side of the shortcut, go down, dunk into the water, shake your controller, enter the shortcut at this angle, and then throw a green shell forward to break this box. And you've just done the ending shortcut with one green shell. This one can be a bit tricky and might give you a bit of grief, but if you're ever in first on this track, getting a green shell is really common. There's a good chance you might just get a green shell every single lap. And if you are uncomfortable with it at all and you have 3 greens, you can just go into into the shortcut normally and mash all 3 of your greens forward, and it'll work out as well. But yeah, this is arguably the most race-defining section of the entire track. This shortcut saves so much time because if you can't take it, you go a lot wider, and it's also water driving, which is very, very slow. So knowing every single version of the ending shortcut here is absolutely essential for placing well. Okay, finally, there's a different strat you can do in the starting section if you're going into it from a previous lap. You're going to want to go to the left of this ramp and trick off it. Aim to land onto this left side platform, then start a charge jump. When you get to the edge of the platform, do a neutral charge jump. That will give you enough height to completely skip the water and get onto this platform. You can then start a right drift on the landing, then do a mini turbo trick off the very highest point of this ramp, and that will again allow you to completely skip the water, and that's the fastest way to drive this section. This one really isn't too bad at all. The main 2 things that are going to give you grief are these boxes on this left side platform. If you run into them, they're most likely going to put you off your line and you're going to fail, and also the gap jump over the water. This one's really easy to get if you know what you're doing though. If you either get a boosted charge jump, so a charge jump while you have a trick boost active, or you just do a regular charge jump at the absolute latest possible moment off the platform, you will clear the gap with absolute ease. If you charge jump not at the latest possible opportunity and you don't get a boosted charge jump, then more likely than not you won't make the gap. And it should be noted that this can be done on lap 1 as well. The starting strat I talked about initially is only really for 1st and 2nd place. If you're starting in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, generally the left side of the track, you can do this strat at the very beginning of the race very, very easily. And generally it's a very, very good tool for getting into the front, so it's worth it to know for sure. Okay, next is Dino Jungle. This one is not too technical of a track at all. It has a couple things to talk about, but nothing too complicated at all. So firstly, the fastest way to drive the starting section. You can right trick off this little ramp, get onto this rail and right trick off that. Then keep going and trick off this egg nest. Wall ride up this wall, let yourself automatically detach, get an air trick, and it's as simple as that. This one's not difficult. Genuinely, the only thing you might have trouble with is the trick off the egg nest. Once you get the trick timing down though, it's really not that bad in the slightest. Okay, now the fastest way to drive the next section. Instead of driving on the main road here, you can trick onto this dinosaur's back, get a bunch of trick boosts off it, 3 in total, and trick back onto the main road, which is going to be a good bit faster than driving on the main road otherwise. And this one is dead simple. You just need to make sure you get the trick timings correctly. So first, you can trick off this metal plate onto the dinosaur's back. As soon as you get on the dinosaur's back, you can do a neutral trick. As you're coming up to the start of the main body area of the dinosaur, you can do a right trick. As you're going up the dinosaur's neck, you can do another right trick. And then off the end of it, you can just do a neutral trick. Again, as long as you're getting the trick timings down correctly, you're going to have no issues with this one at all. Okay, and the last thing to talk about here, you can do this track's massive mushroom shortcut with only a single feather. After tricking off the dinosaur, charge jump onto this red railing, and then on the railing, once you get here, right before the rail turns to the right diagonally, you can right trick off the rail. You'll then clip off this wall, hold right the entire time and spam right air tricks, and right before you hit the ground, use your feather. Keep on holding right the whole way and you'll make it. This one is going to be a good bit more challenging than the previous 2 strats that I showed you. In my opinion, it's not bad by any means though. The main thing you need to get down is the timing of the right trick, which is really a lot more generous than it looks. The only thing I should mention is that if you're on a very good pace on this track, so let's say driving in the front the entire time uncontested, you know, without getting hit or anything, then more likely than not, this T-Rex is going to be completely blocking you off if you try and do the feather cut on the final lap. I'm mentioning this because I had to learn that out the very, very hard way. And I can speak from experience that running face first into this T-Rex's feet is a one-way ticket to a bad race, so just be careful of that. Okay, next up is Great Question Mark Block Ruins. Firstly, you can do a really fast mushroom shortcut. If you drift into the off-road just on the outside of this torch, use your mushroom, drift tight without bonking into the tight wall, trick off this bump in the grass onto this rail, trick off the end of this rail, then while you're in the air, aim to land on this rail, and then get an extra left trick as you're going around the second rail, and then trick back onto the main road, and you've done it. This is the most important shortcut on the entire track. It's going to save you a ton of time compared to going around otherwise. And there are quite a few different ways for you to go about doing doing this particular shortcut. For example, you don't have to do the trick off the bump in the grass onto the rail. That can be quite a common fail method for some people, so if you feel uncomfortable with this at all, you can take the turn a bit wider and release a super mini turbo into the rail instead, which generally speaking is much safer. And secondly, you can take the second rail a little bit faster. If you do your left trick right before you hit this bump on the rail, you'll trick at an angle, so you automatically detach off it a little bit earlier. You can then drive off this ramp and get an air trick, which is going to be a little bit faster. This does come with the slight added risk of just jumping off the rail entirely though, and the payout is a very minimal time save. So again, if you're not comfortable with this one and you don't deem it worth it, then just do that left trick a little bit later, which is 100% consistent, and jump off the rail as normal. Also, if you want to get onto this rail, if you can't take the off-road shortcuts prior, you can simply start a charge jump as you're going off this ramp, and then as you come up to the rail, do a left charge jump onto it. Easy as. Okay, next, this one won't take too long. The next section has a plethora of different ways that you can go about it. The absolute fastest way is to take this railing, get some tricks, and then trick onto this pole. This is the most common path, and it's on a railing though, so it does come with a lot of risk. If you deem that rail to be too risky to take in the moment, you can instead take this cloud and then trick over to the right and trick onto the pole all the same. Basically just a slightly slower version of taking the rail on the right. And if you're in need of coins at all, you can just take the main road below. Okay, next, you can take this track's final off-road shortcut without any items by basically just diving into it, crashing into this box, and that's faster than going around. This shortcut is a good bit harder than the other ones I talked about on this track, so let's get into the finer details. You'll want to get a boosted trick off this ledge, preferably by getting a trick boost off this pole prior, then aim to trick off this big ring, then go left in the air. Then as you're coming up to the wall, you'll see two indented lines, one at an X angle and one at a Y angle. You'll want to land on the indented line that's at an X angle here. Then you'll start wall riding up this wall, and then soon after charging a super mini turbo on the wall, jump off it. Aim to trick off these leaves on the inside of the massive ring. Then once you do, gradually steer left in the air, and then coming up to this box, do a left air trick right as you're about to land, and aim to crash into this face of the box, preferably more near this right side bolt. If you've done that perfectly, your trick boost should be cancelled out. Your vehicle will be pushed a bit to the left, giving you a good angle to drive back onto the main road. And if you've nailed that, that's going to be a good bit faster than going around. This is absolutely great to learn, especially if you're in first and front running this track, as of course, if you're in first, you can't pull any mushrooms whatsoever. And it's a good tool to stay ahead of the people behind you that could be pulling mushrooms. There are a couple ways in which you could be failing this though. Firstly, make sure you don't trick on the underside of this big ring. If you do, you're going to have to completely abort the shortcut altogether because you're not going to get enough height. Next, once you're midair here, make sure you don't go too far to the left, as that could result in you going too far out of bounds. And also be careful if you do get the trick boost, because you'll get a bit more of a dodgy angle going back onto the main road, especially if you miss the box while getting the trick boost, so just be careful of that. But generally, if you hit the box, even if you get the trick boost, you should be fine. Next up is the Leaf Cup, so we're going to Cheep Falls. This track has a good amount of shortcuts that you need to learn, and it contains possibly the most difficult one I'm going to talk about in this entire video. So firstly, at the beginning of the race, you can charge a super mini turbo into this bit of off-road, then trick off the ledge here, aim to land on this wall, then go up the wall, get an air trick, and land back on the main road. And doing that is going to be a decent bit faster than going around otherwise. This is, in my opinion, the easiest of the three shortcuts that I'm going to talk about on this track, and is absolutely worth it to know to get the best possible start here. And this one's main fail method is fairly easy to avoid. Simply, if you land too low on the wall, that'll count as out of bounds. This will most likely be caused by getting a bad trick onto the wall, missing the super mini turbo, or just a combination of the both. But yeah, as I said, this is probably the easiest shortcut that I'm going to talk about on this track, and this is absolutely imperative to know for getting into the front at the beginning. Okay, next, possibly the most difficult shortcut I'm going to talk about in the entire video, and it goes by the name Tarzan. If you couldn't guess already, it's called Tarzan because in the shortcuts, you trick off 3 trees total. To 1, take a really fast and tight line in the air, and 2, skipping all the slow water driving by being in the air. This is possibly the most difficult shortcut to learn in the entire video, but that comes with the benefit of it's also the most effective because this saves so much time. Because of course, you're 1, skipping a bunch of on-water driving, which is already really slow, and 2, you're doing a really big off-road shortcut, shroomless, by doing this. This shortcut alone has been effective in turning Cheep Falls into more of a front-running track than the bagger it used to be at the start of the game. So without further ado, let's get into how to pull it off. So you're going to want to drift tight on this turn and charge an orange mini turbo. And then when you're coming up to the end of this wooden road, release your orange mini turbo. Then after releasing that super mini turbo, you're going to want to aim to drive on this little bit of off-road to the left. You'll then land on the very edge of this water stream on the upper left. You'll then want to maneuver to the right of it, trick off it onto this strip of rock, carry on driving along this rock, and then as you're coming up to the end of it, start steering left. And then once you get to the highest point of it, do a left trick off it. You'll want to have gone left enough to be facing this angle going into these maple leaves, and then to be facing this left side rock wall at this angle. Make sure to do another left air trick right after you pass the maple leaves, and aim to land on the left side rock wall here. If you've landed on it perfectly, you'll wall ride just underneath this tree, and you can let yourself detach off the wall naturally, and you should be just over this platform. And after detaching off the wall, you'll want to immediately hold left and do a left air trick. You'll want to aim to do a trick off the left side of this tree, and then pretty much straight after you do, transition from holding left to holding right. You'll then trick off the underside of this tree, then keep holding right all the way up until you're angled to this part of the next tree. That's branching out towards the right. Trick off that, and then aim to land just to the left side of this yellow fence. Start a right drift on the landing, trick off the platform, and you've done it. So that was quite a bit with some very precise executions that you need to pull off. So now I'm going to go through the most common ways in which you might be failing this. The first way is the setup into the main Tarzan bit of the shortcuts. This does require some very precise driving, so generally it's just something you're going to have to get used to, and most likely is going to take a good bit of practice to get the hang of consistently. Next is the landing on the left side rock wall. The main way that people mess up here is landing too low on it, because if you land too low, then you'll hit this platform, and if you hit this platform, you're going to lose all of your speed and you're going to fail it. This is one of the better fail methods though, because you'll then land on this platform, in which you can do a mini turbo trick off this ramp and skip most of the off-road still. So it's not absolutely awful. Next is not getting your air movements right, which will most likely cause you to miss one of the tree tricks. In my opinion, this is probably the easiest and most consistent sequence of the shortcut to pull off. As long as you remember to left trick into the first tree, and then soon after tricking off the first tree, hold right, you should be fine. And lastly, the most unlikely one, but it can happen. You might get too low of a trick off the last tree and land on this rail, which is just a straight shot to the out of bounds. It's rare, but it can happen. It's also good to note that this shortcut is coin dependent. On Swoop Rob Hog specifically, you can only really comfortably do the shortcuts if you have 5 coins or more. If you have 3 or 4 coins, you can do it. It's just going to be a bit more challenging. And if you have 2 or less coins, it's probably not feasibly happening. That previous fail method I mentioned of getting onto the rail because you get too low of a trick off the last tree is almost always caused by doing Tarzan on a low coin count, so just be careful of that. But yeah, this one is probably the most difficult shortcut I'm going to talk about in the entire video. So if you can't do it, no worries, there are alternatives. You can instead take the main water stream, start a charge jump, drive into this right side mini waterfall, and then do a left charge jump and you'll get shot up really high. And then you can drift across the top bit of off-road and trick back onto the main road as usual. This one is all about just finding that sweet spot where you'll get a ton of height from that left charge jump, which is right here. If you could just get that memorized and get that down, you'll have no issues with this. It should be noted as well, when you drift through the yellow fences on the top, you should avoid drifting into the corners of it where the little poles are, because then that will put your vehicle at a full stop. But if you avoid them, you can keep your drift, which is a lot faster. And also don't go too tight here. If you go ever so slightly too tight, that will count as out of bounds. And if you don't want to learn that, what's even simpler is just charge jumping through the off-road, which is by far the slowest way of driving this section out of every single method we've talked about. But if you've got absolutely no other option, it's still faster than going around. Yeah, overall, this section has a whole 3 different ways to go about it, so you can just do whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, now the last thing to talk about on Cheep Falls, you can do the ending mushroom shortcut shortcuts without any items whatsoever. All you need to do is trick off the far left side of this ledge, start a charge jump on the landing, and immediately transition into holding hard right. Keep holding right the whole way, and right as you're about to hit this bit of off-road, do a right charge jump into this pole. You'll trick off the pole, keep holding right and do right air tricks, and you'll go over the entire off-road shortcuts, which is a lot faster than going around. This one can take a little bit to get the hang of, but it's so easy once you get it down. Some ways in which you might be failing this is not being able to maneuver enough while you're in your charge jump, which getting the trick boost before can make it a bit more difficult. So if you are struggling with this particular bit of it, you can just not do the trick beforehand. It might help. And the main one is mistiming your charge jump. You have to do that right charge jump as soon as the tip of your front wheel hits the off-road. If you do it any earlier, you might not get the necessary height. And if you try and do it too late and you hit the off-road a bit too much, that will cancel out your charge jump entirely. So this one's just about learning to maneuver into it comfortably and also getting used to the timing of the charge jump, which if you get both of those parts down, this one is very consistent to pull off. Okay, next up is Dandelion Depths. And if I'm being brutally honest here, this track has almost nothing worth talking about. The track drives absolutely dead simple, and it all revolves around one big mushroom shortcut at the end. Although there is one little thing you can do. If you're entering the first turn from a previous lap, you can do your right drift a bit earlier, and you can then mini turbo trick off the road here and trick onto this pole, maneuver in the air so you land back on the main road here, and that's going to be a little bit faster than drifting around the turn normally. This is kind of the only thing that's even remotely worth talking about on this track. It saves only a little bit of time, and it is really easy to pull off. But this does come with the risk of unnecessarily driving off the track, so do this one at your own risk. Next is Boo Cinema, and although the track does look very good and very flashy, it also admittedly doesn't have any major things to talk about. Just a couple little things you need to know to be driving this track as optimally as possible. Firstly, on this straightaway, it's fastest to take this right side railing. You can simply trick on it, get a neutral trick on the rail, and then once you get by this line, do a right trick. You'll then go off the rail, you can get an air trick, and that's the fastest way to drive this section. Next, always take these conveyor belts when they're turning anti-clockwise. So you take this first conveyor belt on lap 1 and lap 3, and you take the second one on lap 2. And finally, at the very end of the track, you can get a trick here. Right drift and release your mini turbo and get a trick here. Then go to the right and trick up onto the wall. Then let yourself automatically detach off the wall, then aim for the left side of this pole. This is probably the most difficult thing to learn on this track, but even then, it's kind of easy once you understand it. What makes all of these tricks possible is having enough speed. So as long as you're always at your top speed going for these tricks, you'll be absolutely fine. Also make extra sure you trick on the left side of this pole and not the right side, because I had to learn the hard way that the right side is in fact out of bounds. Okay, next up is Bones Burnout. And this one actually has a decent bit of stuff to talk about. Firstly, at the very beginning of the race, instead of drifting around on the main road, you can charge jump onto this wall. And that's a little bit faster than drifting around on the main road otherwise. This one's extremely easy. It's a very free time save. You'll most likely be failing this one if you either get bumped by another player. In that case, just play it safe and go around. Or if you're messing this one up completely uncontested, I don't think I can save you, unfortunately. Next, the fastest way to drive this section, again, instead of drifting around on the main road, on the top path, you can trick off this ramp onto the wall ride off it, let yourself automatically detach, then get an air trick onto this rail, and then right at the tail end of your trick boost on the rail, do a right trick off it back onto the main road. Again, this one is fairly easy to pull off. Sometimes you can be caught out by the wall detach though, so if you're not comfortable with that by any means, you can just trick onto the rail normally. Then straight after that, you can take the next turn extremely tight by doing a quick left drift here, releasing your mini turbo, immediately starting a charge jump, and charge jumping off the top left corner of this ramp over this rock, and landing onto the main road. And to perfect this section, you can then trick off this little strip of off-road on the right, get onto this wall, trick off the wall, back onto onto the main road again. This whole sequence does take a bit of practice, but it's not too bad in the slightest. The most challenging part for sure is the charge jump off the top left corner of the ramp. You need to make sure you're releasing that mini turbo early enough and angling yourself wide enough so you have time to actually get that charge jump out. And to get enough height from the charge jump, make sure you're doing a neutral charge jump. If you try doing this with a left charge jump, you won't get enough height, and you'll probably get a really dodgy landing like this. Also, make sure your vehicle's not facing too much towards the left when you're doing this charge jump. If you are, you'll probably get a bad landing like this again. Generally, when you don't get a high enough charge jump off the ramp, you'll go off this rock, which causes you to get that really bad landing, so just be careful of that. And if you're not comfortable with doing the charge jump at all, you can just do a regular mini turbo trick off it, which is a bit slower, but way easier. And the trick onto the wall after this is the easiest part, but also the riskiest, because if you fail this, you are going straight into the lava, so you do need to be careful. But once you are practiced enough on the timing of this, it's dead easy not to fail. And finally, this track's best feather spot, and one of my favorites in the entire game. As you trick onto this wall, you can trick off it and hold left. Use your feather, and that's going to give you enough height to get onto this glider path here. And this is faster and a lot safer as well. You won't get slowed down by a shock if it's in play here, and you're gliding above basically every single player that's going to be any kind of threat to you. So yeah, an absolute crucial feather spot to know, and by far the best one on this track. Okay, now we're moving on to the Lightning Cup, so that means we're going to Moo Moo Meadows. This track mostly revolves around mushroom shortcuts, but to do those mushroom shortcuts optimally does take a good bit of practice. Firstly, the fastest way to cut off this big upcoming turn, you can start a charge jump around about here, and as you're coming up to these stripped white lines, you can use a mushroom, release your charge jump, aim to trick off the right side of this tree, then land back on the main road, easy as. This is actually very simple to get the hang of, and it's a lot faster than drifting around and using a mushroom. And it's very easy not to fail. The absolute most common fail method is going out of bounds by tricking on the left side of the tree. That's literally it. If you remember to trick on the right side of the tree and to never ever trick on the left side of the tree, you will get the hang of this one in no time. Okay, straight after that, there's another really big mushroom shortcut that you can mostly clear without any item whatsoever by charge jumping off this ramp and tricking off this cow. And this isn't that precise at all. It's actually fairly easy. Coming up to the ramp, you're going to want to do a left charge jump off this coin. You'll want to try and do it while the coin is there, because the coin gives you the extra boost necessary to have enough height and speed to actually get onto the cow. If you miss the coin, most likely you'll run into the cow instead of tricking on top of it. And then after tricking off the cow, you can drift onto this ramp, and it's as easy as that. Genuinely, the only thing you need to get right here is the charge jump off the coin onto the cow. That's kind of it. Once you nail that, you've got this one down completely. And finally, the most optimal way to take the ending shortcuts by starting a charge jump and doing a big shroom boosted charge jump onto this wall, and then automatically detaching off that wall back onto the main road. This one's great just because if you just used a mushroom and didn't do any sort of charge jump or anything, then you would not be able to fully skip the turn with only one mushroom. But doing this makes it so you can. And it's really easy to get the hang of. Just make sure you get that charge jump timing down, and also make sure you're landing on this part of the wall. If you land a bit earlier on the wall, it will still work. You'll just get a little bit more of a wide landing. So this one's very flexible and very easy to get the hang of. Next up is Choco Mountain. Fairly similarly to Moo Moo Meadows, this one also does revolve a lot around big mushroom shortcuts. But regardless, this one still has a couple fancy no item shortcuts that you should be learning. Firstly, literally from your starter boost, you can turn right, do a quick right drift, hop over most of the mud, and come out the other side safely. Doing this from your starter boost, especially if you're starting in the front, is super easy. It's literally as I described it. Do a quick right drift into the mud, but then use that starter boost to hop over most of the mud, and with that you can do a very effective turn skip. And you can also do this one if you're coming into it from a previous lap. After you go off the final ramp, you're going to want to angle yourself a little bit wide, and then start a right drift on the landing, soft drift as much as you can to the right. You're going to want to go for an orange mini turbo, release that orange mini turbo, then hop into the mud, and if you've done that correctly, you'll get out safely and you're done. This one is a little bit more challenging than getting it from the starter boost at the beginning of the race, because it takes a good bit of soft drifting and you need to get that angle absolutely right. But if you're ever front running this track, this is a super good one to know. Okay, next, the strat that is called Superman, where you drift out super wide, hang onto the wide wall, then release your super mini turbo and charge jump off this ramp to go flying over the entire bit of mud below you to do a really fast turn skip. This is by far the most important thing to know on the entire track if you want to play it in the front, as this saves a very good chunk of time as opposed to going around otherwise. Okay, so soon after passing this corner, you're going to want to start a left drift. Stick just to the tight side of the road, and then once you get around here, start holding wide in your drift. You're going to want to aim to bonk the wall just to the left side of this metal line. Your vehicle will slightly drag against the wall for a little bit. By the end of it, you should have an orange mini turbo. Soon after your vehicle has stopped dragging against the wide wall, you can release your super mini turbo and immediately start a charge jump. You're going to want to briefly hold right in your charge jump to align yourself with the highest point of the ramp. That's here where the coin is. Preferably you're going to want to hit this coin, but you can still do this if you don't. Do a left charge jump on the highest point of the ramp while you still have a mini turbo boost active. You need the mini turbo boost still active because you need a boosted charge jump to get enough height to make the entire distance. And if you've done that correctly, you'll land just on the edge of the road. You can then trick off this little bump in the road, and you've done it. This is by far the most challenging thing to learn on this entire track, so don't feel too bad if you don't get it on the first try. This one is a tough one to get. The thing that gets most people out is getting that angle from the initial drift. Generally here, you need to find that sweet spot to start bonking onto the wide wall, which, as I said, for me, that tends to be just to the left side of this metal line. Once you get that down, you also need to make sure you're soft drifting enough to get that super mini turbo out in time, as you absolutely need to have a boosted charge jump to make the entire distance. If you only get a blue mini turbo, you will not make it, and you'll have to either bail out the shortcut, or if you go for it, you'll fail it and most likely go out of bounds. But yeah, if this is a track that you enjoy driving in the front and you want to try and front run it more, this is definitely the most important thing to learn on the entire track. And finally, ending off with a pretty simple one. If you only have one mushroom coming up to the last item set, you can release an orange mini turbo and then start a charge jump. Go into the far left side of this ramp and then do a left charge jump onto the wall. You can trick off the wall onto this platform, and then from that you only actually need one mushroom to get back onto the main road. This is a really easy one. The only thing to note is that it is good to get a boosted charge jump onto the wall. You can still get the height without it, but it's a little bit more precise. If you do a boosted charge jump onto the wall, you'll get enough height to get onto the platform extremely comfortably. So generally, I'd say that's the way to go. Okay, next up is Toad's Factory, and you would not believe how simple this track really is. Compared to its original variant on the Wii, it's kind of unbelievable. This track on Mario Kart World only really has one notable thing to talk about, and that's the fastest way to take the ending section of this track. Simply, all you need to do is trick off the left side of this big boost ramp, land and rail ride off the right side of this big metal bar, do a right trick off it and land on the right side of this big metal bar, do a right trick off that and then land on these railings, and then trick off these railings back onto the main road. This one hardly takes any practice at all. It's a really easy one to get down. The only thing you might have a little bit of trouble with is the landing on these rails at the end, as they move left and right throughout the entire duration that the track is played. So by any means, if these rails are in an inconvenient spot for you, you can simply improvise and go for the boost panels on the bottom instead. But yeah, that's literally it. This track is dead simple otherwise. Okay, the next track and the final track of the Lightning Cup is this game's Bowser's Castle. This is arguably the best track in the entire game for front running, playing in first. And this track also contains what I consider to be the most important shortcut in the entire game. And we're going to start with it right away because it takes place at the beginning of the track. So if you're playing this track for the first time, typically if you're driving this section, you just stick to the main road and take this turn here. But you can actually skip this entire massive turn by doing a gap jump over this bit of lava beneath you, which is going to save you so much time as opposed to going around. And there are 3 different methods of doing this gap jump, and I'm going to talk about all 3 from the easiest to the most difficult one. So firstly, by far the easiest method, the rail version. Now, I can imagine that probably looks quite intimidating with the wall ride, wall jump onto the wall clip, then the trick off the sign. But this one is by far the easiest and the most consistent version of this shortcut to do. So to do this one, after tricking off this ramp, go to the right and start a charge jump. If it wasn't obvious already, all of these shortcuts take place on the right path. The left path is utterly useless. Then once you get your charge jump, release it onto this wall, then trick off this wall onto the railing. As the rail does its first left turn, you can do a left trick for an extra trick boost, but this is is not necessary at all. Then once the rail makes its second left turn, once the turn is about halfway complete, just before this coin, right trick onto the wall. Hold that wall ride up until you get to around here where this big screen is. Trick off the wall, then aim to clip off this wall where the black and yellow line is. After you've clipped off the wall, you're going to want to make sure from now on you're holding hard left in the air. And if you've done all of that correctly, you'll land safely on the other side. The timings of every single step on this shortcut are actually a lot more generous than you'd think, and they are quite hard to fail once you get it down. The two main ways you might be failing it though are firstly the trick onto the wall from the railing. You need to get that timing down absolutely correctly. You especially don't want to go too late, because if you go too late, you're not going to be high enough on the wall to then get the proper wall clip off the black and yellow line. And secondly is the trick timing off the wall. Again, you need to get that absolutely right and clip off the black and yellow line on the second wall. The main way you might be failing this is tricking off the wall too early and getting too much of a wall clip. That's going to put your vehicle to a bit too much of a stop, and you won't have the speed necessary to make the gap. But yeah, this one is super easy to get the hang of. If the rail's free online, this is the method that I always go for. But the other two methods are also very good to know, because the rail could very easily be trapped or contested by other players. The next method is near identical to the rail method, as you get the wall clip onto the sign and make the gap that way. The only difference is that you don't take the railing, you actually do a charge jump onto this wall, and you can go high enough to get that clip on the black and yellow line to do the rest of the shortcut as normal. So to do this one, you're going to want to take this turn tight. As soon as you get around the turn, start a charge jump, and then while in your charge jump, align yourself to be just to the right side of this square on the ground. Once you get to the square, charge jump onto the wall, and once you've gotten up high enough on the wall, generally around about where these buttons are, I suppose, trick off the wall. You should get a good clip off the black and yellow line on the second wall, and then as usual, hold hard left in the air, spam left air tricks after getting the trick off the sign, and you should make it. This one is a little bit more challenging than doing it from the rail, but if you do it correctly under the right circumstances, it is 100% consistent. And what I mean by the right circumstances is the fact that this shortcut is coin dependent. I would say generally to guarantee this one, you do need at least 2 or 3 coins. As you can see, if you have 0 coins, you will get a really slow trick off the sign, and you will almost never make the shortcut, so do not even try this if you have no coins. But yeah, if you do have a comfortable amount of coins, this one is fairly easy to get the hang of, I'd say. You just need to know where to trick onto the wall, which I use this square on the ground as a visual marker, and you need to get used to the trick timing onto the wall clip, which might catch you out for a little bit, but once you know the timing of everything here, you'll be fine. The biggest piece of advice I have for this one is just don't try it if you're on 0 coins. You're not going to make it. Now, let's say theoretically you're playing a race on 0 coins, the rail is completely blocked, and obviously you can't go for this method on 0 coins. There is a third method you can do, but it's the only one that's not 100% consistent, and that's by really simply just charge jumping over the entire gap. No wall rides, no sign tricks. You just do a left charge jump, slightly clip off the wall for extra height, and it's as simple as that. This is definitely the most simple version and will probably take you the least amount of time to learn. The only problem is this one is way more failable than the other two methods. So to do this one, release an orange mini turbo around this turn, and once you've straightened up your vehicle, start a charge jump. You're going to want to be angled out a bit wide, just to the side of this wall is a good place to be. And as you're coming up to the wall, you're going to want to be angled in between these 2 bolts. And right as you're about to hit the wall, do a left charge jump. You'll clip this wall, which gives you enough extra height to make the entire gap, and you'll just about make it. This one is by far the easiest one to learn, because it literally is just left charge jump in between these 2 bolts. It could not be more simple than that. The main problem with this shortcut is that the wall clip is very inconsistent. You can't exactly guarantee a good wall clip, so you might go for this one, think you have the perfect alignment, and then you'll get a really dodgy wall clip and you'll fail the shortcut entirely. So I generally use this method as an absolute last resort if I can't take the other 2 methods. You might find yourself in a situation where you have to go for this one though, so it's still worth a practice. And there's one last thing to mention about this gap cut. This charge jump method is made way easier if you have a mega mushroom or just a regular mushroom. If you have a regular mushroom, you can start a charge jump, go out super wide, then coming up to the wall, start going in super tight tight, but not tight enough to the point where you'll clip the wall. Use a mushroom and then do that left charge jump, and you can do it 100% consistently without needing to do that tedious wall clip. This one's super easy. Just make sure you've gone wide enough and angled yourself tight enough going into the gap jump, so you land on this lower part of the castle wall and not this higher part. And if you have a mega mushroom, you can literally do the exact same thing. Start a charge jump, go out super wide, go in super tight, do a left charge jump as normal, and you'll make it extremely comfortably. So if you have either of these items, if you learn it properly, you can just guarantee the gap jump. Okay, there's just one more itemless shortcut to talk about here. You can steer to the right, trick off this little strip of off-road, get on this wall and do a huge wall jump, and then land back on the main road to do a really cool turn skip. This one is a good bit easier than the many versions of the gap jump that we just talked about, and is a decent bit faster than going around and taking the main road otherwise, so it's a free time save if you can learn it. So to do this, after landing from the cannon glider, of course steer right into the strip of off-road, and it's a bit hard to see, but you're going to want to trick off this bit in the off-road, and your vehicle is going to want to be facing just to the left side of this big black cloud to the right. Trick off the ledge and keep that line. You'll land on this part of the wall. You're then going to want to trick off the highest point of it. Once you do, start holding hard right, spam right air tricks, aim to land back onto the main road here, and you've done it. This one is literally just all about practicing your alignment getting onto the wall, and then your trick off the wall. They're both fairly easy to get the hang of, and once you get the hang of it, this one is very hard to fail. The most common fail method will probably be where you land on the wall. What can happen most of the time is that you land too early on the wall, and then that will cause you to not get enough distance to make it onto the following platform. Or you might mistime the trick off the wall. You might go a bit too early. You might go too late and not get the trick at all. It's just a matter of practice makes perfect. You're obviously taking a very uncomfortable line here, but once you get used to it, you'll be fine. And finally, this track's best feather spots. Firstly, a really easy one. You can do the first gap jump with a feather. Literally just come up to the wall and use a feather over the gap. It could not be more simple. If you have a feather here, I would actually recommend just doing the gap jump with a feather instead of doing any of the other methods that I showed you. Just because using a feather here is actually faster than doing any of the itemless methods. And most importantly, unless you horrendously mess it up, you are guaranteed to make it. And there is one more feather spot shortly after the wall ride shortcut that I just showed you. When you're going off this ramp, you can stick to the right side. Don't do a trick off it. As soon as you land, do a sharp left drift. And as you're coming up to the edge of the road, release your mini turbo and use your feather. That's going to let you do what would be a big mushroom shortcut with a feather. This one's going to take a bit of practice because you absolutely have to get the setup and the alignments right. But again, once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad at all. One thing you do need to be very careful of though, however, is that if you go too tight, you will be counted as out of bounds. I've been caught out by this one a couple times, so I thought it'd be worth a mention. Okay, next up, the final cup of the Grand Prix, the Special Cup. So we're starting with Acorn Heights. This track has quite a lot of shortcuts and strategies for you to learn, and if you do learn all of it, you can really get ahead of your competition. So firstly, shortly after taking this first big turn, you can release an ultra mini turbo, charge jump onto this rail that's branching out, do a right trick off it, and you can aim to land back onto this rail where the second set is, doing a decently fast gap jump. This one is as simple as I described it, basically. The method to doing it is literally just releasing an ultra mini turbo around the big first turn, then pretty much as soon as you have, start a charge jump, and then you can do a boosted charge jump onto the railing, and while you still have that trick boost active from the charge jump, you can do a right trick off the railing, then you can hold left and do some left air tricks in the air and aim to land on this rail on the other side where the second item set is, and it's literally as simple as that. And the fail methods are extremely easy to avoid. What makes doing this fast gap jump possible with a right trick is having a trick boost while you do it. If you do the right trick without having any kind of boost active, then you won't have enough speed to make the distance, so be careful of that. And this one is a lot more rare, but if you have a really high coin count, if you do that right trick really late with the boost, you can actually overshoot the glider completely. Again, this one very rarely ever happens, but it's something to watch out for. Overall, this one's really easy. It's not going to take you too long to get down at all. Okay, next, the fastest glider strat. Again, a super simple one. Glide down here. Make it so you're facing where the wall is on the right side here. Then once you get besides the road on your right, start gliding up. Go up right and get just to the side of this wall. And pretty much as soon as your vehicle gets next to it, do a left trick into the left side wall. You'll get a really quick wall detach off it. You can then immediately do another left air trick, and you can trick off the leaf, and that's literally it. This is super easy once you get the angle right. right and the left trick timing right. That's kind of all I have to say about this one. It's very easy to get the hang of, and it's by far the fastest glider strat that you could be doing, so it's a free time save. Okay, now we're going to talk about this track's big off-road shortcut, which has an absolute plethora of different ways to take it without any item whatsoever. So firstly, the fastest way to take this shortcut, even faster than if you were to use a mushroom in the shortcut, you can get onto this railing, then soon after your vehicle passes this white tulip beneath you, do a right trick onto this railing, then at the tail end of your trick boost on the second railing, do a left trick off it, hold left in the air and do one left air trick. You'll then land on this left side wall, let yourself automatically detach off it, immediately do a right trick in the air, then aim to trick off the top left side of this lamppost. You'll then want to go left and aim to land onto this wall in the shortcut, and if you've done that correctly, you'll wall ride through the entire shortcut, doing it without any item needed whatsoever. This is the most common way you're probably going to be taking this shortcut. This is the fastest way to take the shortcut, even including using a mushroom through it, and it's by far the most consistent method as well. The most common ways in which you might be failing this though are the left trick off the second railing. You do need to get the timing right here, because if you go too late, you can get some funny air pockets on the railing, which can cause you to just not get the left trick at all, so you have to be careful of that. You absolutely need to get that left trick while you have the trick boost active. If you do it any later, you will fail this shortcut, and you might fail by landing on the wall in the shortcut incorrectly. How you land on the wall depends on your coin count. In the shortcut that I just showed you, I was on 5 coins. This is a lower amount of coins to go for the shortcut with, so I had to land a bit more on the right side of the wall. But as you can see on this attempt where I did it with 10 coins, I could very comfortably land a bit more left on the wall. So your coin count is always something to keep in mind when you're going for this shortcut. That's especially the case if you have too little coins. I would generally say for this shortcut, you need a minimum of 4 or 5 coins to actually go for it. As you can see, if you have a low amount of coins, you won't even have the speed necessary to get on the wall in the shortcut. So yeah, for this, I'd say you can only really comfortably do this if you have a minimum of 4 or 5 coins. And also, if you have around 13 coins or more, so a high coin count, if you do the method that I described, then you'll get a trick like this off the lamppost. You'll be at a lot more of an upward angle, and a lot of the time, this will end up happening. If you do have a high coin count and you want to go for this, however, there is a solution. Again, you're going to want to trick off the second rail at the tail end of your trick boost, preferably as late as you can. And instead of doing any air tricks, just hold hard left the entire time in the air. And if you do that, then you'll get that perfect angle off the lamppost into the wall. You do need to get that left trick timing right off the second rail though, because you are kind of cutting it close with the left side wall. As you can see, if you do that left trick too early, you will not get on the left side wall in time. But yeah, the main thing with this shortcut is that it's very coin dependent. If you have, I'd say 0 to 3 coins, you just shouldn't go for it. If you have around 4 to 12 coins, you can do the first method that I showed you. And if you have anything above, you do the exact same method, just don't do that left air trick. Now, if you were to have a low coin count, thankfully that is not the only method to taking this shortcut. When you trick onto that first railing, stick to it and let yourself fall off the end of it. Do a left trick while you're in the air. Then once you land on this leaf, hold left, do not do a trick off it. Then as soon as you land, start a charge jump and start steering to the left. You should be just to the side of this bit of mud. When you get that charge jump, release it onto the left side wall. Hold that wall ride and then trick off the wall and aim to trick off the top left side of this lamppost. And then you can aim to wall ride on the wall in the shortcut as normal. This is a very, very easy one to get the hang of. You just need to remember to only do that one left air trick after you get off the first railing, because you need to be going slow enough to angle yourself right up next to that left side wall, so you can obviously charge jump onto it and then trick onto the lamppost. A super easy one to get the hang of, and although it is slower, this could be a safer option for you than the previous method that I just told you. And if you don't like any of those methods, or the lamppost is for whatever reason unavailable, you can instead do this. So you pretty much do all of the exact same steps as the fast method, but pretty much as soon as you land on the left side wall, you're going to want to start holding B, and when you automatically detach off it, start holding hard left to get back onto the wall. And then once you detach off it again, as soon as you do, shake your controller to get an air trick. If you've braked enough, you should get that air trick out just in time before you hit the wall in the shortcuts. So then you can wall ride off it as usual and complete the shortcuts. Again, this one is super easy. The absolute main thing you need to be getting down is braking in time. Again, you're going to want to start holding B pretty much as soon as you get on that left side wall, because if you don't, you won't get that air trick out in time in the shortcuts, and then this will happen, which is going to lose you a lot of time. And there's just one more version of the shortcut shortcut to talk about. This is very exclusive to online play, but if players have broken these right side boxes, you can very simply just charge jump onto the wall from the main road. This is by far the most simple version of the shortcut, and the main thing that's good about this one is that it's the only one where you get an item by doing it. So if these boxes are broken and you're in the back and you need some power items, I would actually recommend doing this one over all the other methods that I showed you. But yeah, this is by far the most important section on the entire track. It's no joke when I say this shortcut can be the make or break in your entire race. Okay, and the last thing to talk about on this track is how to take the rails at the end. And it's dead simple. Simply get a trick off this bump in the road, then get onto this green railing. Once you get to the first coin, do a left trick off it, and then do a left air trick onto the second railing. And then you could do a left trick off that railing onto this railing. Then you could do a right trick off near the end of that railing back onto the main road. This is really easy. As long as you could just control yourself in the air, you'll be fine. And if you have mushrooms, what you can actually do is stick to the second railing, and then once you come up to this coin at the end, use your mushroom and then do a right trick off it. And you can then use a mushroom on the landing, and that's a much faster way to take the ending section if you have mushrooms. And there's one thing to note about this: don't go for it if you have one mushroom. This is only faster if you have the second mushroom on the landing for recovery. If you have one mushroom, instead just stick to the 3 railings as normal. Then after doing that right trick off the last railing, you can shroom through this little bit of off-road and do a boosted charge jump. Easy as. That's just about it for Acorn Heights though. A super fun track to drive once you learn everything. But out of everything here, I would put a massive emphasis on the off-road shortcut, as this section will oftentimes make or break your entire race. Okay, next is Mario Circuit, and to be completely honest, this track has basically nothing to offer when it comes to shortcuts and strategies to learn. You only really need to know a couple things to absolutely perfect your driving here, and I'll go through every single one really quickly as none of them are that complicated at all. Firstly, coming up to the third item set, you can charge jump onto this row of blocks for a very tiny turn skip. You can do this massive off-road shortcut with 2 mushrooms. This is the most effective use of your mushrooms on the entire track. Shortly after that, you can drift out wide and release a super mini turbo into this bit of off-road, which is faster than going all the way around. And the fastest way to drive this section is to charge jump onto this row of blocks, trick off it, and then do a right drift through the entire bit of off-road here. Even without any mushrooms, this is faster than sticking to the main road. And yeah, that's kind of it. I'm gonna be completely honest, none of this is entirely necessary. Bagging and getting good items is more so what's gonna be carrying you on this track. Next up is Peach Stadium, and unfortunately, just like Mario Circuits, there's really nothing going on here. There's just a couple things to know to help you play this track a bit more optimally than you would be otherwise. Firstly, at the start of the race, you can do the off-road shortcuts shroomless by charge jumping into this pipe. That's it. It could not be any more simple. And when you're going off this ramp, if you have a feather, you can use that feather to get onto this rail to take the turn a bit faster than you would be otherwise. That's kind of it. This is one of the most dead simple tracks in the entire game, and overall it has not really that much to offer. Okay, and finally, the last track to talk about in the entire game, Rainbow Road. This is the longest track in the entire game by a landslide, so understandably there's going to be a bit to talk about here. Firstly, the fastest way to take this split path section, you're going to want to take the right path here and drive on it as normal, and once you come around this turn, release an orange mini turbo, steer left, and then you can trick off the edge of the road and land back on the other side of the road to do a very fast path switch. This one is super easy to get the hang of, especially if you know the ways in which you could be failing it, which there are 2 main ways. The first way is going for this and not steering to the left enough. As you can see, if your vehicle is facing towards the right too much, you will not make it. And the second way is if you don't get that orange mini turbo boost, as you need to have that mini turbo boost active while you trick off the platform to have enough speed to make the gap. Again, as you can see, if you don't have that mini turbo boost, you will not make it. And if you are uncomfortable with doing this with just a regular trick, this shortcut is basically unfailable if you just do a charge jump over the gap instead. So yeah, overall a pretty big time save and a very easy one to get down. And there's actually just one more itemless shortcut to talk about on this track, and it's near the end of the track. You can skip this whole upcoming turn by doing this.
Wow!
Out of anything I'm going to talk about on this track, this saves you the most amount of time. And the fact that it takes place nearly at the end of the entire track makes this the most important shortcut to learn. So to do this, from the big glider section, you're going to want to land on the far left side of this road as early as you possibly can. As soon as you do, start a charge jump and start slowly creeping to the left edge of the road. Soon after you get your charge jump, release it and do a neutral charge jump off the edge of the road. As soon as you go off the ledge, do a right trick and get onto the right side wall. From there, once you get on the highest point of the wall, trick off the wall and start holding left in the air. You'll want to do a left air trick and aim to trick off the right side of this pole. Then from there, it's as simple as angling yourself to land back on the main road, and you've done it. This shortcut is incredibly important to know and is really going to be the make or break at the end of your races here. So you need to be getting this one absolutely right. I'd say the main ways you're going to be failing this one is the landing on the wall. Very simply, if you land too early on the wall, you're not going to get enough height to get onto the pole in time. And if you land too low on the wall, Lakitu really doesn't like that. So I'd say the number one thing to practice here is your landing on the wall. And if this particular method is a bit tricky for you, there is a slightly slower but safer method that you can do instead. From the glider section, instead of landing on the main road as early as possible, simply just glide to the left side. You're going to want to gradually glide down to the side of the wall, and then just before you get besides this line right here, do a right air trick onto the wall, then trick off the wall at the latest possible opportunity as normal, left trick onto the pole, and then aim to get back onto the main road, and you've done it. This is the safer method just because generally it's a bit more consistent to actually pull off, and since you keep your glider basically the entire time coming up to the shortcut, it's a lot harder for players to bump you out of the shortcut or hit you with items right before you're about to take it. So if you want a safer and an easier option, this is the way to go. And lastly, this track has a couple notable feather spots. Firstly, when you get to the split paths on section 2, you can stick to this left side path, and then on this turn go out wide, then go in super tight. Then again, angle yourself a bit wide, then do a sharp left drift. Trick off the ledge, use a feather, and you can do a very effective turn skip with the feather. I will warn you for this one though, Lakitu is very, very strict, so this one might take you a bit of practice to get down. And the last feather spot to talk about, right after this item set, you can start a charge jump. Then right as you come up to this ledge, you can release it, then use your feather in the air for a very simple turn skip. This one is super easy to get down, and it's fairly handy as you get good use out of your feather, and then you get another item basically straight after. But yeah, that's just about it for Rainbow Road. Out of anything, I'd say the ending shortcut is the most important one to learn, just because it saves the most amount of time out of anything I've talked about here. And it's at the very end of the track, so sometimes it can really be the deciding factor. Thank you all so much for watching. This video took me a while to get done. I know I didn't cover exactly every single shortcut in the entire game. I just covered every single shortcut and strategy that I use at a high level to compete and win. If there's anything I didn't include, then I just didn't deem it necessary. But with how fast the online play has been evolving in this game, I can imagine maybe in 2 years' time or maybe a bit more, this video will be outdated. So in the future, if this video does age very poorly, I will make an updated version. But for now, every single thing you need to know to compete online in this game is in this video. And as I said, this video took me ages to make, so if you did find this video helpful at all, if you could consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, all that good stuff, I would really appreciate it. But yeah, I think I've gone on for more than long enough. I hope you lots have a fantastic rest of your days, and bye-bye.